Hi, I'm Kathy Millett, and this week I'm going to be talking to you about ground cover, how you take white to the next level. Well, last week we got to our whiteboards and sculptor mould now more or less dry. It's only a couple of days ago I did it, it's still a bit damp where I made it more gloopy, but the rest of it really set up. And what I'm going to do now is just cover the white. There's a number of products you can use for this. I always use craft acrylics. This was my favourite bottle, Raw Umber, and this is the colour of Raw Umber. I've diluted it slightly because I prefer it to run into the cracks, but you can see that there's quite a lot of the white showing through. It doesn't cover it as well because perhaps I have over thinned it a bit. But when I popped to the shop this morning, they didn't have any Raw Umber. They only had burnt umber. Not such a fan of the colour when it comes to soil, but it's not going to show anyway by the time I'm done. So this is raw umber on this side and burnt umber on this side. And the burnt umber I've done straight out the bottle. You can see the marks of the brush, but it covers it a lot better. And if you're not going to put a lot of ground cover on, I guess it's a better option to do it a bit thicker. You don't have to use craft acrylic, you could use emulsion or latex paint. You can get it ready mixed to the colour of your choice. If you're in a desert area or you've got a bit of sand you can take in, you could probably even match it to a photograph. If you don't want to do emulsion, any craft acrylic, anything that's just there to cover this up. But don't use enamel, oils or spray paints, because if you've got any blue showing, it will get eaten away. And I have tried, seeing whether it would make a nice erosion effect. Didn't work for me. You can try it and see if it works for you. But yeah, I have had some quite serious problems when I've used the wrong type of paint on this blue foam, as well as actually the wrong type of glue. So as long as it's water-based, you'll be fine. So next up, I'm just going to paint all these brown. So I've mixed up well, it's about 50% water, 50% paint. I say mix loosely. I like it to be thin, as I said, and it will go, and I'll probably end up putting a couple of coats on, but none of this should show through, so hopefully it'll be fine. And it's a bit redder than I'd like it, but there we go. It covers the white, and that's the important thing. Now, because this is water-based, you can carry on doing your next layer after this if you don't need the base to be dry. If you're sifting on dry materials and you want to poke them around a bit, you may want to leave it to dry up first, but the advantage of using all water-based is you do end up with a quite a bit of working time that doesn't get lost whilst you're waiting for things to dry. So, my go-to ingredient for ground cover is grout. This is just brown grout from your local DIY store, and I like to put it on with a tea strainer because it gives a nice even surface. And because it's going to be resin underneath, I'm just going to sprinkle it on everything. Now, you might think, how does that actually stick? And you can put glue on first, or if the paint's wet, you can sprinkle it. I generally go through afterwards and do a white glue and water 2-layer mix. So that's what I'm going to do now. I like putting grout on because it falls and fills the gaps. It's very natural in the way it covers the landscape. It's not put on or applied, it's just fallen. And I really like that look that it gives. My sculptor mould isn't even underneath, so it gives it just enough texture to give some interest. and variety like you'd see in the real world. And there's quite a lot of grit in it, so at smaller scales you might want to get an unsanded grout. This is where putting the glue on first would help, because the grout would key to these steeper sides more easily, but it'll get there magically in a bit the way I do it. Right, next up, the water and glue to hold it on. This is just IPA, isopropyl alcohol and water. I dollop it in, I couldn't tell you the proportions, it's about 1/3 IPA to 2/3 water, and you have to mist it from a distance or you'll just end up knocking all your carefully sifted grout off. You can drip water on, but I find that tends to move the grout quite a lot and you end up with rivulets and funnels and it doesn't look quite as you want it. So this technique I find to be the best. You need quite a fine spray for this to work. Now in those areas where it didn't quite stick properly, I'm going to actually put a little bit extra on now. And the dampness will help hold it on. Next stage, good old-fashioned white glue and water, thinly mixed so it spreads incredibly easily, and I just drip it on in a random pattern and make sure that everything's covered. Grout does have cement in, so technically it should set itself, but I never trust it in this amount of thin layer. This is going to take a long time. I'm going to do it to all three, so check back at the end and I'll show you what they look like. Right, well, there's a lot of glue and grout and water floating around. Top tip, never put them directly on paper. They will run down the side if you put enough glue on, and I always like to make sure there's plenty of glue on things. So they'll run down, they'll drip everywhere, they'll make a mess. That's fine, just put them on a piece of newspaper like I have here, and then underneath something to hold them up so that any glue that does come down doesn't stick it to your newspaper. Yeah, so I'm going to leave these now overnight to dry, and believe it or not, they probably will dry overnight even though I've put so much water on. And the trouble with getting these bits glued is it runs down and it ends up in the river, doesn't it? But what I have done is on these sections I put a bit of water, put a bit of grout, put a bit of glue, put a bit of water, put a bit of grout, put a bit of glue till it covered it totally. So there's quite a few layers on, and I'm a great believer in multiple layers of everything. So let's see what they're like tomorrow.
It's all sticky and brown. Ugh. Oh, look. Ooh. Oh. I'm sure it will get better soon. This is much better than last week. Look, scenery. Starting to look like the real world now. I was getting worried for a bit what she was up to, you know, all that white stuff and no rocks or culverts or anything, or nothing to do with water really, just big holes. Well, this is much better. But a little bit damp still. Well, I suppose it is a water module. Wow, this is getting much better. Look, she's actually got scenery. Oh, this is impressive. Proper scenery. I can imagine now living here. Well, I've got a vivid imagination, as you can tell. But, getting good. I like this. It'd be nice if she had some water on or something, because, hey, that's what we're about, but looking good. Oh, wow. Wow. Isn't it nice? Brown stuff. Sandy. Reminds me of the bathroom somehow. Can't quite put my finger on it. Yeah. Yep, definitely. Definitely an improvement. But I don't feel my waterfall's as dramatic. It's just this little ripple. I know my scale's smaller, but I was hoping for like 100-foot fall. Huge. No, no, this isn't going to be 100 foot. You know, I guess it takes all sorts of dioramas to make a course. At least it's brown now. Exciting! Can't wait for next week. Can't wait at all.
Right, it's the day after. Things have dried up, nearly, and I've got my bases. So this is what one looks like. You can see in some cases, it's dried a little shiny, that's fine. It's still not the final layer. I'll do that when I do the actual scenic element. This is just the base that I can now start and put all my water on. And if it's a little shiny on the water area, I'm not that bothered. So we've got the 1 to 35, O, HO and N all ready for the next stage. Next week, we're going to be talking about puddles. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe on YouTube or on my website. You can also like me on Facebook, Kathy Millett Modelling. Look forward to seeing you next week.